It had been reported that this rally was intended not just to energize the president's supporters, but to lift the spirits of a man who's craved the adulation of his base during the long months of lockdown.
You are so lucky I'm president, that's all I can tell you.
But the Trump campaign's hopes of a turnout of 100,000 supporters inside and outside this great American comeback rally fell short. In fact, the president cancelled what had been planned as a pre-rally address at the outdoor overflow area because of a lack of numbers. Those who filed into the 20,000 capacity arena had their temperatures checked, having waived their right to sue the Trump campaign if they contracted COVID-19. Earlier, it had been reported that 6 members of the Trump advance team had tested positive for the virus. And on Saturday, Tulsa, the location of the rally, hit a new daily record of infections. But the president mocked caution and suggested throughout his speech that protesters had been causing trouble outside and discouraging attendance. But there were few protesters and no incidents reported before he spoke.
You are warriors. Thank you. We had some very bad people outside.
There was the usual blame for the Chinese too, but here with racially offensive language.
Has more names than any disease in history. I can name Kung Flu.
And blame for public health officials for the spread of the virus in the US.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
Administration officials quickly briefed journalists that the president was just joking. As for the unprecedented demonstrations spanning race and class across the country against police violence and systemic racism, the president once again presented them as unchecked anti-American anarchy. And he presented his general election opponent, Joe Biden, as a man with a questionable record on race in failing mental health amid these historic protests.
If the Democrats gain power, then the rioters will be in charge. And no one will be safe, and no one will have control. Joe Biden is not the leader of his party. Joe Biden is a helpless puppet of the radical left.
By far the longest section, though, was a defense of the president's cautious use of a ramp following his speech at the West Point Military Academy the week before that had led to speculation about his health.
It had no handrail. It was like an ice skating rink.
This event wasn't simply about amusing the president, though. 1 million people were reported to have registered for the event, giving their phone numbers as well as email and home addresses. This is essential information for ensuring turnout in November's election, especially as a significant proportion of Trump's base aren't regular voters. These events are crucial for the Trump campaign's momentum.
We will make America great again.
But the rally did seem like a public health experiment. What would happen if you packed thousands of people into an indoor arena, many refusing to wear or take minimal precautions, for several hours of singing, cheering, and shouting in a city experiencing a surge in COVID-19 infection? We should know in 2 to 3 weeks. Shihab, Rattansi, Al Jazeera.
Caroline Heidelman is a political strategist, joins me now from Los Angeles via Skype. Good to have you with us, Caroline, on the programme. I mean, just sort of overall, a strong, confident president that can draw the crowds and is in full control of the economy, society, healthcare. What more can we say about what he said?
Well, that's certainly the line that Trump is giving the rally goers. But at the end of the day, his polling numbers are actually slipping significantly. He's under 40% for the first time in 2 years. A majority of Americans don't like his handling of the pandemic. A majority of Americans don't like his handling of the economy. And we have a 13% unemployment rate. So it is very important for him. I'll give him credit. It's very important for him to rally his base. He has called it a self-proclaimed comeback, and it is. He's sliding in the polls. So this was a bit of a desperate rally. I don't know how many of these he'll be able to do after the data comes out if this was a super spreader event in a couple of weeks.
So let's just talk about then about the attendance. There was much anticipation, wasn't there, about the turnout, and it really fell more than short of what it should have been. What does this really tell us about that bottom line base support that he does have? Was it that they just didn't want to turn up because of coronavirus, or that he is losing support, as you say, with the numbers that are coming out at the moment?
Well, with a 39% approval rating from Gallup, it's clear that maybe multiple things are happening. Certainly, he has less of a base of support. But I would like to think, too, that people were afraid to come because as much as a lot of Republicans are less likely to engage in social distancing and less likely to wear masks because of the leadership, or I should say lack of science-based leadership in the White House, at the end of the day, certainly they've got to know people who've been affected by COVID-19. So I'd like to think that that folks stayed away, although it's also pretty obvious that there was a movement on Twitter to get young people to sign up for this event, and over 1 million, if you listen to the campaign, over 1 million people signed up for it. They expected 100,000. They got 10,000. So at the end of the day, it might have been a joke put on by who we're calling Zoomers, Generation Z.
There was a lot talked about in this address to his base audience, Caroline, but there was a lot of Joe Biden bashing as well. He was quite adamant, the president, in trying to insist that he was the better man to be president and to be re-elected in November, and that Joe Biden was too old, too sleepy, and really past his sell-by date.
Well, at the end of the day, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, a lot of historians and political scientists agree that Donald Trump has been the worst president that the U.S. has ever had. When you look at the Constitution or his lack of knowledge in following it, for example, deeming protesters who are exercising their First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly as, a threat to American democracy, even though that's how we became a nation, to his, violation of the Emoluments Clause and enriching himself while in office, to constantly not telling the truth in ways that are easy to verify, and everyone knows he doesn't tell the truth, and so his word doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, whether or not Joe Biden is a strong candidate, Donald Trump is our founding father's nightmare in so many ways.
And of course, another topic that he touched upon, and one that is very sensitive at the moment, is about the black community. And again, he insisted that he's done more for the black community than any other president, and that this is part of his legacy. I mean, it's obviously a very sensitive subject, and it's going to cause more debate, I'm sure, not just in Tulsa, but across the country.
Well, what's remarkable about Donald Trump is that he has inspired the largest Black Lives Matter, the largest movements and protests in U.S. history. So 3 weeks of sustained protests in major cities and small towns across the United States. And if you look at what is different about this particular wave of protests, I think it's because we've lived through 3 years of Donald Trump, who overtly throws racist red meat to his base. And if you look at numbers from 2016, we know that people with high levels of racial resentment were far more likely to turn out and vote for Donald Trump because he was the titular head of the birther movement that tried to label our first black president as being born elsewhere. He called, Mexicans rapists. He said a Latinx judge couldn't do his job because he was Latinx. He put up a Muslim ban. He put brown children in cages. He said that the Central Park Five, these boys who've been wrongly convicted, should still get the death penalty during his 2016 election. He said that the white supremacists in Charlottesville, good people on both sides. He retweeted a video of George Floyd that showed that had a right-wing commentator saying that somehow, George Floyd was not a good person, insinuating that he may have deserved to be murdered by police. So, yeah, his legacy is definitely tied to race, but I would say it's the opposite of what he's claiming, that he has actually made it so clear to white Americans that racism is not a theoretical thing that they might, know happens, but they don't witness it. We have seen it in front of our very eyes. He hasn't hidden it. And so for that, we can thank Donald Trump for moving the needle on anti-racist legislation further than anyone else, simply because he has been so racist during his presidency.
Caroline Heldman, good to get your insight, and thanks very much for joining us from Los Angeles.
Thank you.